What's going on, YouTube? I know it's been a while. I apologize. Shit happens, but whatever. We're back. So today I'm going to be doing a viewer requested or community requested video here, and it's how to break down the urban lakes, and specifically the Phoenix area urban lakes. So today I'm out here at Red Mountain. A couple reasons for that. One, I know this lake very well, so topographically I already know what I'm going to be looking for, and that's going to hopefully help me teach you guys what to be looking for some of these lakes. But two, I mean, it's so gorgeous here. It really is. It's beautiful. But hopefully you can take something away from this, especially if you're new to the Phoenix area or even just new to bass fishing. Again, the urban lakes, these are the easiest to access from all the lakes pretty much. They only take a standard license in most places and you don't have to pay to actually get into them. And then you can just spend a couple hours here, do a little bit of fishing, head back home, whatever. So I'm gonna shut up and I'm gonna help teach you how I can break down a lake for the first time. So one of the first things that I do when I'm trying to take down the lake and everything, first thing that I like to do is do my research, obviously. I like to see what I can see from Google Maps, maybe if there's specific weed lines, is there anything intriguing that I can see from the maps, shallow water, deep water, structure, rocks, tules, islands, whatever. So that's usually the first thing, and I believe most people do that when they're trying to investigate a new body of water. Once I'm actually here though, I break it down, maybe different than other people, but this is just how I've always done it, is I always like to fish something reactive and aggressive first. Maybe not necessarily big like a swim bait, but something along the lines that'll tell me how aggressive the fish actually are. Because if they're not aggressive, well then that's when you drop down to step 2. But anything like a jerkbait, a crankbait, stupid bugs everywhere, jerkbait, crankbait, spinnerbait, something like that, or some sort of swim bait, either a paddle tail, glide bait, something like that. Oh my god, the bugs are everywhere. Now, specifically for Red Mountain here, I'm fishing on the west side of the lake. I've got the small island in front of me. You don't have a whole lot of place to cast behind you, so just keep that in mind if you do happen to come here. But again, like I said, first thing I like to do, go through. Personally, I do like throwing a larger bait, and that's just to let me class what size of fish do I have. Do I have big fish, majority big fish, majority little fish? Is it schoolies? Are there mixes of all sizes? How aggressive they are? Because if I come across a school and none of the fish are aggressive, then there's no point in throwing a glide bait or a swim bait or a paddle tail or something like that. That's when you can drop it down to maybe something smaller in size. Instead of a 6 to 8 inch bait, maybe something 4 to 6 inches. Not so aggressive, something that pauses a lot more, and then just slowly start working through the fish. And this is also going to help show you where fish are located. And you've probably seen everyone else talk about that too. Like, it's not always catching a fish on the first cast or the second cast or whatever. A lot of times it can just be simply finding where the fish are from having looked at Google Maps. This is the first spot that I wanted to try out. The island is close enough that I can cast to, yet it's still far enough from shore, from the bank that you can access, that it looks like it creates a nice hole, a channel in here. This is one of the shorter bits of it. The opposite side is also going to be thinner as well, and then there's a little bit more of a hole in the middle here. Man, there's bugs everywhere. And then off to the left here, what we've got is shallow water, anything from 4 to 5 foot out to kind of where you can visibly see before it starts getting that dark blue. And then in the middle, it appears to be deeper, anything from probably like 8 to 12 feet. I know the lake here maxes out from what Game and Fish say. The lake maxes out at 16 feet. So the average of the lake is probably going to be between 10 to 12 feet for like its depth. So using something that's going to be diving a little bit shallower. Now I'm using the DRT Tiny Clash. Obviously, if you don't have this, you don't have to throw it. Anything else that you're looking for that reaction strike or something that's going to hopefully try to trigger a fish would be, like I said, something that I would throw out first. And all I'm doing is casting into the weeds. Just go with what you've got. Like the S-Waver 168 is another good thing to throw out here, just to see if you can get some aggressive fish. Off on the left side of the island here, from Google Maps, when you look at it, you can see that there is a shallow flat up there, probably the same depth that you've got close to the bank here. So probably no less than 2 feet, no deeper than 5 foot. There's also a rock there because I hit a rock there earlier. So what that tells me is that, say during the winter time, there's probably going to be a couple fish bedding off there. Now it's not too extensive of a flat and it doesn't really cut off too far, maybe 20 feet off the point there, and it doesn't really extend to the back side of the island. So I'm not really going to be focusing too much like around that specifically right now on the drop-offs of it. Yes, because this is summer, it's hotter than dog shit outside, so not necessarily the flats are going to be the best spots. But like I was saying, for the spawn, that's going to be an area that I'm going to want to target, or around the spawn. I don't necessarily fish the spawn itself, but pre-spawn and post-spawn, where you've got staging fish, cruising fish, and more aggressive fish, that can definitely be a good place to throw out. As well as it's right with the Thule lines here. Now the Thule line, like the island just isn't right there. There's a decent portion that actually goes behind there. So fish have, I believe there's like 10 feet of just like crap and whatnot in there. So fish can definitely get in there. Another thing too, if you come out here early enough and late enough, you can also throw a frog. But again, any other body of water that you're going to, that's something that I noticed on maps. So right now, like I said, I don't specifically think there's going to be fish holding on there too much right now. Maybe as it cools down, the sunfish start coming up there, you might get some more aggressive feeding fish. But and that's, like I said, to keep that in mind for the spawn. That's a good place that you can throw. And then in the fall, when you have fish that are, again, aggressive, feeding, and they want to move, they want to chase, they want to feed, that can be another good like ambush spot there. Years ago too, this also used to be one of my best topwater flats as well, because I would cast onto the top of the flat, and by the time I would bring it over the deep water, that's when the bass would come up and hit it. Now, I don't specifically have a jig with me today to do like a jig with a crawdad or Texas rig or anything like that, but definitely this deep hole, like I said, would be another place that I would want to throw a Texas rig, or like Carolina rig, a jig, something like that. And that would also be to help test the water. Now I can get this thing down with the deep cranking lift. I can get this thing down pretty deep. I know I can already access like 6 to 8 feet with just the standard lift. So getting down an extra, down to like 10 feet, 12 feet with the cranking lip shouldn't be too hard. Another thing as well, and I'm really bad for this, you should also be making parallel casts with the shore. And more specifically, here, parallel doesn't work out too well, like casting right along the bank, because the fish don't sit right on the bank. They're usually out anything from 5 to 10 feet from the shore. So what I've found is casting slightly perpendicular, slightly off, like completely straight with it. You also create an ambush point doing that as well. Because if you cast straight along the bank, a lot of times you can spook any fish that may be sitting right on the bank. Casting out a little bit, the fish they're a little bit more comfortable, because if they get spooked, they can go into the deep water really quickly. Sometimes, however, they'll get attracted by a splash so close to them, or relatively in their striking range. And then bringing it in closer and closer to the bank, you create that funnel yourself, which can also help attract a bite. because as you're pulling it in closer to the bank, there's not really any more room for that bait or that bait fish to go, which can also, like I said, attract a bite or at least be able to let you see a fish. Now for Arizona, this is not a very typical situation for an urban access lake. Most lakes that we have, they're just straight concrete bowls. No structure, no rocks, really nothing that's going to be able to hold fish. So this is a little bit unique for the Arizona ponds. Now, anywhere else in the country that you go, this is normal. And obviously with less desert surroundings, but this is absolutely normal for anywhere else you go in the country. Did I just lose the lip? I did just lose the lip, huh? Well, that's stupid. As tragedy strikes, I'm just going to continue on what I would normally do. So, say that I've been around a portion of the lake or the whole lake if it's small enough to actually access, and I really haven't seen any aggressive action towards the more aggressive lures. Again, the crankbaits, the jerkbaits, spinnerbaits, anything top water, swim baits, glide baits, and I'm not seeing anything is responsive, and I'm not really getting fish to be pulled out. Or I am seeing fish, but they're not committing. So, you know, at that point you can think obviously they just don't want the big bait and I need to downsize to something, or I need to go smaller and finesse. Now, I know a lot of people in Arizona, just because we have a lot of pressure in the lakes, typically just go straight for finesse first. And it can definitely get you fish. It can definitely get you fish and bites right off the bat. But it's not necessarily going to be the size that you're looking for. Right? When I'm throwing a swim bait, I'm looking to see what's the biggest fish in the lake or in the area that I'm fishing that is willing to come chase. And when that's not producing, okay, now I'll downsize. Now I'll go finesse and see if that either increases or maybe now there's just less life. And unfortunately, you're just gonna get a situation where you could just get unlucky and nothing works. You know, maybe because for Phoenix, we do have local tournaments, and they do, I don't know specifically for Red Mountain, but I know like Kiwanis, Chaparral, ASU Research, local bass clubs will come out and do bass tournaments there. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well, is if you're trying to fish it, maybe try to avoid a weekend. Today is a Monday for me, so there could have been a lot of pressure over the weekend and the fish are still kind of neutral from that. Or, like I said, say Kiwanis, for instance. I was there on accident the day of a tournament, and there was 70 or 90 people, something like that, in there. And I think one bass was caught, and it was like 3 pounds, if that. So that's another thing to keep in mind. If you have the time to research it, go ahead and see if there's any local tournaments, because you want to try to give yourself the best chance possible while you're out here of producing a fish for yourself. So again, if possible, come out here before work if you have a later shift, or lunch if you have a long lunch. After work, I know a lot of people come out here after work. And if it's the first time you're coming out to a lake, obviously that's what the intention of this video is, but try to make the first time you come out to a lake during the day, sometime when the sun is up, because you want to be able to see everything around you. So that way, if say, you know, you get off at 8 or 9 o'clock and that's when you're able to come out, go fishing again, most lakes close between 10 and 12 for Phoenix, so also look at the regulations for that. Different parts of the country, I'm not quite sure. I know some city parks will close at like 8 or sundown. The majority of the lakes for the Phoenix areas are going to close at 10. I know some of the actual Phoenix area, Phoenix and Tempe, they'll close at midnight, 10 or midnight, something along there. So like I was saying earlier, I've already thrown the Clash. I've thrown something big. Wasn't getting a whole lot of reaction with it. Actually, earlier before I started recording, I actually had a little bass come follow it, but he never came back for it. So that for me, that tells me maybe I should try something different. I should try something different. Texas rig, or Ned rig, weightless Senko, wacky rig, or stick bait. Some sort of Texas rig, worm, curly, drop shot, whatever. This is just what I've had success on in the past year specifically. Now, obviously, you're going to be changing this up for your lake, your situation. But it is called the free rig. So it's pretty much a Finesse style Texas rig. You have a free swinging weight. Now, yes, this looks like a drop shot weight, but it's got the loop as opposed to like the actual line, the knotless little attachment. And just like you would Texas rig, you just thread that on first. Texas rig, the worm that you're using, the worm, the crawler, creature, whatever it is, crawl. And now you have a downsized Texas rig that you can throw on spinning. Or if you have a bait finesse system, a BFS system, you can throw it on your little bit heavier duty system for that. The particular weight that I'm using is an 1/8 ounce, but you can go up to like a 1/4 ounce if you need to, and if the rod permits. Now, what I'm using, if we go specifically with the free rig here, I try to fish it the same way that I do a Texas rig. Personally, for me, I catch most of my fish on a drag for Arizona rather than bumps and stops and jumps. Mostly I get my fish on the drag, let it pause, drag, let it pause. And more specifically something for like Red Mountain, the technique that I found that actually works the best to get the most consistent bites. And it's really slow, and I hate fishing this way, but it catches fish when, if this is the only place that I can fish, it does help to catch that. You can try this for any new body of water as well, because fish are, they're curious, they're opportunistic. And that is simply just casting the bait out, letting it sink, and sometimes just letting it sit. I, for here, have found that letting it sit for, say, roughly 30 seconds, 20 seconds, and then you'll move it 6 inches. And then you'll just leave it there for another 30 seconds. That kind of helps eliminate some of the smaller bites of like the 2 pounds and less. I usually find 2.5, 3 to 4 pound fish that are still in the lake. They usually prefer to take that. Now, when I am targeting some of those bigger fish, and I know there used to be huge fish in here, but another technique to do is with Texas rig, same thing. Like an actual, you know, you've got your 20 or 25 pound fluoro, whatever, or braid. You know, you've got your actual like jig rod, your Texas rod. Throw that up in there and just let it sit. Just let it sit. Just keep tight with it, so that way you can feel when the fish takes it, but just let it sit. And this is something that I've specifically seen for this lake, is the bass won't necessarily swim away. They might start doing the big loops around it, or they'll go into the deep water and then they'll come back and they'll look at it and it's still there. So it's piquing their interest that, okay, this thing was just moving, but it's not moving. Why isn't it moving? And then simply moving it another 6 inches, you know, it either piques their interest again and they actually come up and eat it, or it just makes them do another swing around. I sat here for one day 4.5 minutes, and I think I moved the bait maybe all of 1.5 feet to 2 feet. And finally a fish ate. But by that time I was so stupid bored of fishing like that, I did not want to spend another 5 minutes in one spot for one fish. And that's also personally me. I don't like fishing slow. I'll fish slow and I'll fish small and finesse when I have to. But if I can get away with not, then I will. Now this, again, I know it's hard to see from the camera's point of view, but this is one of the areas that is the most successful for me. And why is that? Well, when you look at just the area that we've got here, the sidewalk, the bank, cuts out a little bit farther away from the island. So the channel that's created is a little bit wider. The deeper part is a little bit wider than the front and the back end of the channel. A lot of fish, especially off that point, a lot of fish will hold off that point into the deeper water, and then, like I said, closer to the opposite bank. Now, this would be a good situation to come out here at night, especially right now during just the dog days of summer. It's hot, it's humid, you know, storms provide. Come out here, and I used to come out here with the Zoom trick worm, believe it or not. But come out here with like your favorite worm, favorite Texas rig worm, and do this. There was weeks upon weeks between July and August, and my friends used to come out here and we would just smack the snot out of bass between like 8 and 10 o'clock at night. And obviously sometimes we'd stay a little bit later because we were 18, 19, so we could get away with it, but thankfully police never came. But we would be out here till late at night and just doing this technique of just throwing as close to the reeds as we could get, letting it drop, letting it sink, and then just slowly moving it back. Usually by the time we start getting hit with the rocks and on the ledge coming down to the actual down the ridge for the channel, somewhere in there, it's usually when we got hit. And those hits were pretty bad. Some of the bigger fish would actually rip the rod out of your hand, because you're sitting here, it's like 9:30 at night, there's no lights, you can't see anything, and the next thing you know, just wham. Zoom trick worm is one of my favorite things if you're going to be just sitting kind of still. Same thing with any sort of curly tail worm as well. Apologize for the wind. I'm out here during the monsoons and I've got one coming from behind me, so we're just gonna have to deal with that. But two of my favorite things, if I am gonna be fishing on the bottom with some sort of like weedless or Texapose kind of system, I like to throw either straight worms or some sort of curly tail worm. I'm not too big on the creature baits, I'm not too big on craw baits. Just personally for me, I haven't been bit on them a whole lot. Just a straight tail worm or a curly tail worm, anything from 7 to 10 inches, has usually been the better tickets for me, especially night fishing right now too. Something else that I don't really hear a lot of people talk about is fishing new lures or different lures on a new body of water. This can help teach you how the lure works and how it responds, and also how the fish are going to respond to it. That being said, if you're not getting any reactions with it, you're not going to learn the second part, but at least take out a new lure to a new body of water. Because you don't know if, okay, well, maybe they want it stupid. Maybe this lake is really active for topwater, right? And maybe you just don't know that from not throwing like a spook or a popper or a wake bait or something like that. Maybe all the fish really are just glued to the bottom, like I pretty much know they are here. But I usually try to do that. I usually try to bring, if I can, 2 rods, max 3 to 4. And that's a tough one right there. How many rods do you bring as well? I just try to limit yourself. If you've got 1 rod, that's pretty good all around with a lot of things, bring that. If you have 2 rods that can cover a decent amount of techniques, bring those 2. And I usually like to bring 2 rods. Like I said, I usually like to bring a fast and aggressive, something that I can do, you know, if it's not swim baits, it'll be crankbaits and jerk baits, top water. And then another rod to do, like I said, all your slower stuff. Things that are gonna sit on the bottom or near the bottom where you can actually just leave it there and kind of let the fish commit itself to it rather than getting a reaction strike. Something else to consider too, if you are pretty certain that in one spot, hey, the swim bait's not gonna work. Okay, cool. That can mean that the swim bait's not gonna work in that one spot right now. It doesn't mean another part of the lake, there's some active fish that are willing to come up and commit to it. So don't be afraid to, when you walk over to a new section, don't be afraid to try the swim bait, the crankbait, the spinnerbait again, because you don't know if there's going to be a fish over there that's actually willing to take it. Now, when you come to the situation where definitely, okay, they truly do not want my first presentation, then stick with what you know is working, and then try to find the same key points that you're catching fish on. Kind of the same thing that you would do with a big lake. Like if you've got a jerkbait bite and you're fishing 8 to 12 feet of water and you've got giant boulders on bankside and a sand flat at the bottom of a flat that's 12 foot, and that's where you're catching jerkbait fish, chances are that's going to be the same consistent pattern across the lake. So you can continue to go down that bank as long as it's the same structural contour and most likely continue to catch fish. Now, little personal secret, my favorite small worm to use, any sort of small plastic lure, my favorite one to use is the Robo Worms curly tail, 4.5 inch curly tail worm, bold bluegill with the chartreuse curly tail. That is my #1 favorite. It works in clear water, it works in dirty water, day and night, drop shot, shaky head, finesse, free rig. Like any situation where you can throw a small worm, that one usually does the trick for me. And you only need to give it just the slightest little bumps with any curly tail worm. You only need to really give it the slightest little bumps, and that tail will kick. Now, just from personal experience here for Red Mountain specifically, I don't catch a whole lot of bass in the middle section of the lake. I really don't. And from, like I've said, topographical knowledge, there's not a whole lot of structure. There's not really huge key pieces of rocks or grass, trash cans, anything like that that's going to hold the fish in the deeper sections. So if you have access, you definitely want to get a topographical map of the body of water you're trying to fish, or get local knowledge of what the structure is, and then see if you can start picking it apart from there. Because there's always a spot, day to day, week to week, hour to hour, there's always a spot where the fish are going to tend to hold. But even more, there's a spot on the spot. There's one spot on the spot where the majority of the active fish and the feeding fish are going to sit. And that can be a stump. It could be a fallen log. It could be a rock cluster. For city lakes, it could be a trash can, a golf cart, a shopping cart. I mean, it's something stupid. It could be someone's lawn chair that got blown in on the lake. Like, there's always going to be a circumference and area where the majority of the fish are going to be for that area. But then there's always one spot in that area that the fish are most active to feed. So one of the last things I want to talk about before I actually leave specifically with Red Mountain here, this greater bowl where you've got the municipal center behind you as well as the dock where they stock from, this bowl, unfortunately, I really don't have too much success here outside of, say, the spawn. You have a really nice flat here that actually goes out quite a ways, and it's pretty much the same drop off for the rest of the lake, but there's more contour, there's more structure along this particular bank than there is some of the others. It is worth it during the spring and the fall to make a couple casts along the bank here, just to see if there are any cruising or holding bass. However, I usually just take a cast or two in a couple places and move. Because again, it'll hold fish, but like during the heat of the summer here, this usually isn't a place that's going to continually hold fish. However, this boat ramp that you cannot use, it's for game and fish purposes only to park rangers. This is one piece of structure. Yes, fly away, duckies, fly away. This is one piece of structure that does continually hold fish. Can I catch one from here? Probably not, because I haven't caught a bass here in like 10 years. A solid bass anyways. But boat ramps, docks, stuff like this, always worth a throw, because you don't know if there really is something sitting on it or not. I know you guys can't see it, but there's a bunch of bluegill right now. Baby bluegill. Bunch of baby bluegill just chilling there. And they all came after my lure when I threw it out there. So this is definitely a place that's going to hold fish. It holds the bait, and if there's hungry predators around, there's a good chance you might get lucky and get a good fish to come at it. During the winter time too, that's when you usually do see some of the bigger bass come out. And then that's when you can get away with throwing a 250 or a HUD. Now this definitely, if you're not getting hit with aggressive baits, is definitely one last spot in the lake that I would definitely give your 2 cents and try throwing a couple things out here. Don't spend a whole lot of time, like I've said. This is definitely something that you can try to break down a little bit more. Because I have seen anglers get some pretty decent sized bass. Better than average for this lake. And again, especially for the spawn, a lot of bass will come up and hold in this little area, in this little bowl. All right, I think I've been talking for too long. One last little note that I do want to point out. Like I said, for Arizona, for the Phoenix area, Red Mountain is very unique with the way that it's set up. Not a lot of lakes, if any really, have the same kind of structure where we actually have deep slots, sand on the bottom instead of it just being straight concrete islands with tules. So this is very unique. Whereas you take a look at a lot of the other lakes. Kiwanis is a good example, Chaparral is a good example. Those lakes don't have, aside from Chaparral, Chaparral has an island, but it's a concrete island. There's no tules around it. It's shallow water around the island, which doesn't really, and it does pop off into deeper water, but I'll have to like specifically do a video trying to break that down to kind of really show you some of the things I'm talking about, especially if you've never been there, never seen it. It's not necessarily that it's unique, it is just a little different. Most of the Arizona lakes are just going to be, I should say the Phoenix area lakes, the urban ponds, they're just basically bowls. That's all they are, they're just bowls. Concrete, filled with water, filled with fish. And everyone fishes them. So this video kind of ended up into like kind of breaking down Red Mountain a little bit. But if anyone does want to see other videos of other lakes being broken down, I can definitely put those up as well. I have fished just about every urban pond that the Phoenix area has. And I'm fairly familiar with quite a few of them. So I can actually go down and start breaking down some of the other lakes and some of the old go-to lures that I used to use for those, if those happen to be like specific bodies of water that you fish. So if anyone's interested in more lakes being broken down, I can definitely do that. It doesn't even necessarily need to be the urban lakes specifically. If you want to see trout lakes up north, I can do breakdown videos of those too. Now if I do the trout lakes, that's going to be fly fishing. I'm not going to be trolling on a boat with dingle bobs and all those fancy smancy little flasher rigs and cowbells. That's going to be fly fishing, because that's where I'm most comfortable fishing that. I'll probably put that poll up too after this video uploads. I'll put a poll up on Instagram and see if anyone else is interested in more breakdown videos. Alright, so a couple last minute things here before I let you all go. This video turned a little bit more into breaking down Red Mountain rather than breaking down a new lake for the first time, but still take some of what I've said and apply that to a new body of water, especially if you are fishing Arizona for the first time, or just anywhere, you know, moving to Arizona, moving somewhere else, new body of water, especially if it is just like an urban environment. Go ahead, take some of this and try it out for yourself, see if it doesn't work. Now, again, I chose Red Mountain. It's close to my house. I know it very well topographically. If you do choose to fish here, don't really expect too much. The lake is very, very tough to fish. Like I said, most technique that I use is either some sort of Texas rigged worm or like the free rig, and just leave it there and just let it sit. Let it sit, let it drown. A fish will come up and pick it up. I just don't have the patience to do that personally. However, if you do, and that is something that you like, this is definitely a place that you can come give it a try. I didn't do the entire lake. I hit pretty much the points of interest that I prefer to fish. Now, if you fish this lake and have other success, fantastic. Maybe put it in the comments below. I'd like to actually hear other people's success, because I haven't caught a good fish here in probably 10 or 12 years. It's been a really tough lake to fish. But if any of you want to see other videos, say Kiwanis, Chaparral, some of the other urban lakes, Evelyn Hallman, I won't do Tempe Town. I don't like Tempe Town Lake. You need a boat or a kayak or something to fish that. So, but anything else that's easy to access, put it down in the comments of what you'd like to see me fish, and I can definitely go through and give you my 2 cents on the lake, my background of what I know about it, as well as if it is a body of water that I haven't fished. Oh, be quiet, GoPro. If it is a body of water that I haven't fished, I can also help break down other things that I'm noticing as well for the first time. So put it in the comments below. I'm probably going to put a poll up on my Instagram as well and see if other people want to see other lakes, other breakdown videos, and then we'll go from there. But I hope you all enjoyed this video. Comment below anything that you learned from this. And again, this is how I break down a lake. If this isn't how you do it, just take bits and pieces from this, that maybe it's something different, maybe a new lure, something like that. You can always just take little bits and pieces from other people's material to actually put it where it applies to you, not necessarily the whole thing and all. But thank you all for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day or night, whatever time it is for you.
Oh my god! There's a little itty bitty baby. Oh, there's a little bass right there. Oh, he's so cute.
Eat the bait. Eat it. Eat it. Eat it. Eat it. Eat it, you turd. Eat it. Eat it. Eat it. Eat it. Eat it. No? Okay, screw you then. Now, personally, I have been fishing this worm way too fast for what I know needs to be done. I just physically can't fish that slow. I just physically don't like fishing that slow.